Hey, tell us the one about the guy in the white mask.
Okay. There was this girl named Lori, a high school student, honor roll, shy around boys. She got this job, babysitting a couple kids. It was supposed to be $20 for pizza and table and long talks on the telephone with her friends who were supposed to also be babysitting. She wasn't one really to listen to a lot of radio or to turn on the news on television, so she hadn't heard about the escaped maniac from the nearby institution, the insane asylum. It was Halloween night, and she didn't know that he was coming home. John Carpenter's Halloween was one of the most successful films of all time. At the time, and for long after it, it was simply the most successful independent film ever released. Now, it did that not all at once. It played around the country in different areas. There was a limited amount of prints from Compass, so not everyone got it at the same time. And really, when it hit television, is when Halloween became an unstoppable force. There was, however, a problem with making a sequel, which was a no-brainer. It was a license to print money, but the first film had ended on a note that suggested that anything coming after would be sort of irrelevant. Loomis had been proven right. Michael Myers was not just an escaped lunatic, he was an embodiment of something much more ancient and diabolic. What story is there to tell? Never underestimate Hollywood's ability to find a way to make money, even when they shouldn't. Halloween 2 is a sequel in every sense of the word. It picks up the moment after the first film ends, yes, but it does something else as well. It picks up on the themes barely developed under the surface of the previous films and expands upon them. In doing so, it found it didn't really have a use for Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie in the film. The thematic material was all Loomis's. It was his denouncement at the end of the first film that the second film would explore. There really just wasn't much to do with a virginal, surviving female from the first film. Laurie is reduced to a MacGuffin, just that prize to be sought by the killer. And Loomis has a different role too. He's no longer a protector, really. Now he's more of a statesman for the supernatural world. He's out there almost as a priest, trying to fight the evil rather than simply protect a community. And that puts him at odds with Sheriff Brackett very early on. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The 1980s were a decade of excess, and the slasher genre had bloomed since the birth of Halloween. Friday the 13th already had a sequel out. There was a lot going on with independent productions. Even major studios were getting involved. Halloween had a big target on its back. The excesses of the new decade were exactly what Halloween 2 would take on thematically. In particular, the idea that there was an ancient atonement necessary to live in such a decadent time. This is made really explicit in the film. I feel like I shouldn't even really have to say it, but the film is about sacrifice, which is a really alien theme in the 1980s, a decade that really gave birth to the mass consumerism that we enjoy today. And I use enjoy in somewhat scare quotes, because we're all guilty, but we all have the same sneaky suspicion that it's not really healthy for us. Now, there are two events early in Halloween 2 that are massively important to the story going forward, but yet they don't really seem that important to the overall story. The first is Sheriff Brackett discovering that his daughter Annie has been a victim of Michael Myers. He's overcome with grief and a lot of hostility. A lot of it has to do with his already estranged relationship with his daughter. He didn't get any kind of closure on their relationship. He throws that rage directly at Dr. Loomis, screaming that you let him out. We know that he's not suggesting that Loomis pop the lock and let Michael take a stroll. That's not what he's saying. He's saying that if you knew this thing was that evil and that dangerous, you should have done more to keep it from our nice suburban gated community. Loomis didn't, and Loomis carries around this tremendous guilt from that. There's a reason that Loomis always seems so ragged and so desperate to correct the wrong of Michael Myers having escaped from Smith's Grove, and that is that guilt. The second major scene involves Ben Tramer. Ben Tramer is just a name drop in the first film. He's a boy in the high school that Laurie likes, but in the sequel he becomes something a little bit different in his single scene. He becomes the first sacrifice. By wearing the Michael Myers mask, or one close enough to that he's mistaken for Michael Myers, the town's rage pours onto him, and he is unfortunately killed. This is a sacrifice, but it's the wrong kind of sacrifice, because it's not a self-sacrifice. What it is taking rage out. It's an attempt at atonement by killing another. That's not how it works. That's not going to ever resolve the problem that's come to Haddonfield. Ben Tramer is ultimately just like a Old Testament offering. I mean, he's even burnt alive, which is exactly how burnt offerings worked in the Old Testament. He's an attempt to fix what's wrong, but he's the wrong attempt to fix what's wrong. Those two crucial scenes will inform the rest of the film going forward, but they're very organic to the story, and we don't look at them more deeply than we have to. That's a mistake, but it's also the brilliance of the filmmaking. They're giving us information without resorting to straight exposition. This is great filmmaking. This is great filmmaking and great storytelling in general. Now, later in the film, they go to Michael Myers' school. It's not exactly sure why that happens. There's nothing to insinuate in the first film that school was particularly important to Michael Myers, except I guess a kid his age would have attended the grammar school, right? But they go there, and that starts a conversation about Samhain, the ancient druid / Celtic festival, the end of summer, the season of the dead. And this is important because it's a sacrificial holiday. And that's, again, what this whole movie is about. When Loomis is finally remanded back to Smith's Grove, he does so with a heavy heart. He knows he's abandoning a town where he feels that he has unleashed this evil upon them. He feels complicit, if not responsible. And Brackett's words are really resonating somewhere in the back of his mind. You can see it in the performance from Donald Pleasance. It's exceptional. But he also talks about the Festival of Samhain. And he talks about burning animals in baskets to atone from the sins of the year and to make sure you had a bountiful harvest. It's that suggestion that atonement and sacrifice are necessary for a healthy society. He's pretty explicit about this. He even goes as far as to say that we're all afraid of the dark in ourselves. See, sacrifice is not about the victims of your sins. It's not about those who trespassed against. It's about healing yourself from the inside. The film is talking about healing society from the inside. It's talking about taking that safe suburban community from the first film that was so explicitly part of the thematics and trying to reform it, trying to make it so that it will never have to go through these horrors ever again. And there's only one way that can happen, and that is by fixing the people who live in it. Not letting us give birth to more Michael Myers. That means parents that don't leave their children alone. That means big sisters who, when they babysit their younger siblings, actually babysit their younger siblings. It means all the babysitters, not just Laurie, have to actually take responsibility for the children. And finally, it turns out it has to be Loomis. I guess it always had to be. Loomis is the one who must sacrifice himself to save Laurie, because Laurie is the one who did step up to protect the children. Something that no one else in these movies has done. Sheriff Brackett wasn't there for his daughter. Michael Myers' parents weren't even home when their daughter was killed. And no one took an interest in Michael at all. His sister was more concerned with making out with her boyfriend than taking him trick-or-treating. When Loomis sets that storeroom on fire at the end of Halloween 2, he knows he's going to die. And he also understands that's the only way to truly stop Michael, because the nature of sacrifice is personal. In later sequels, they would ignore these themes entirely and just play it off as he did what he did because it was the right thing to do. But Halloween 2, despite being a sequel that was clearly made to cash in on the extraordinary popularity of the first film, did more. and it deserves a lot of respect for what it did. And just one note there. Some people, including John Carpenter, take issue with making Laurie Michael's sister. I find that to be the cherry on top. I think it's thematically a kind of brilliant masterstroke, because what they're saying then is we're all Michael Myers' sister. We're all responsible to take care of the children, because the children worry about the boogeyman. It's our job not just to reassure them that there isn't a boogeyman, but not to be the boogeyman.